Good morning. I started the recorder. The floor is yours, Karen.
Lovely. So do we have everyone on board, Sarah? Sarah?
Yes, people are joining. Yes.
Okay. So tell me, should I wait? We should wait a little bit, like 5 minutes to
Yes,
4 minutes?
yes, 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
So we to be on time. Yes.
And until then, hi Karen, it's Mohab.
Hi, Mohab. How are
How are
you?
you? I'm
Very
good.
good, very good. All good. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you. I'm in El
Thank you.
Guna, nice and warm.
We were just speaking with Patrick that here in Switzerland it's not as nice. I mean, down in the valley, Davos is very nice. We all see it, but the weather down there is not so nice.
Are you
So
in Lausanne or in Switzerland in
in
general?
Lausanne, yeah, in Lausanne,
Okay.
and
I don't
Patrick is in
want you
Zurich.
and Patrick to hate me, but it's nice and 22 and we're going swimming this afternoon.
Good for you. Good for you. I envy you, but I'm not mad at you, so don't worry.
But
That's
but
awesome.
but keep in mind that after 4 days I'll be wearing thermals in Andermatt. So so again.
Okay.
But it's a shock going from El Guna at 28 to Andermatt to snow and I think -4, -6, something like that.
Yes, it will definitely be a shock.
Yeah.
Take some sun in your luggage with you.
Oh, and I wish I could go through Geneva to see you, but I'm flying through Zurich.
Malish, next time.
Next time. Oh.
So we can start.
Okay, very good. So good morning, everyone, and very welcome. Thank you all for joining today. For the one who don't know me, I'm Karen. I'm the president of the Egyptian-Swiss Business Circle here in Switzerland and member of the executive board of Swisscom in Cairo. Before we start, let me briefly introduce the initiative behind today's event. This webinar is the first of a new series that we are going to call, that we are calling Seeing, standing for Swiss Egyptian Expertise on Innovation and Growth. It's organized together by ESBC and Swisscom. So every month, the idea is that we will bring together voices from Switzerland and Egypt, comparing experiences, sharing different viewpoints, learning from what works in very different contexts and cultures. So today is the very first step in that conversation, and we are very excited to kick it off with a topic as relevant as leadership across culture. So the traditional playbook for executive search is usually pedigree, credential, track record, and it's being rewritten. And nowhere is that more obvious than when we look across very different markets. So today we are going to explore a provocative question. In markets as different as Zurich and Cairo, are we actually looking for the same leaders, or have we been searching for completely different qualities all along? And to answer that provocative questions, we have two major experts on the floor today, and very proud and very thankful they could take off their time to be there with us today. First, may I introduce you to Patrick Naef. He's a managing partner at Boyden with more than 20 years of experience as a CIO, particularly in the aviation and travel industry. He also served as a senior advisor, or serves as a senior advisor for McKinsey & Company, and brings along strong global and technology-focused perspective. I have to add as well that Patrick lived in Egypt and in the region for a couple of years, so it gives us as well another view of perspective on the topic. Dr. Tamer El Nagar is the managing director at Boyden North Africa with over 30 years of experience across the Middle East and North Africa, advising organizations and leaders on growth, transformation, and leadership in complex markets. So thank you both for being there, and as well, happy birthday, because if I heard right, Boyden is celebrating 80 years. So Mabruk to both of you and to your organization for being there. So today is designed to be a conversation between the two of you, Patrick and Tamer. And at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. So please, anyone in the audience having a question, just drop a line in the chat box. So let's tackle the first topic of today's leadership theme. It's the leadership paradox. Let's start with a reality check. Patrick, when a Swiss multinational says they want a global leader for the MENA operations, and Tamer, when an Egyptian company asks you the same, are they actually looking for the same kind of person? Patrick, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Karen. You know, I believe this is more about the company and the company culture in general than simply, you know, is it rather a Swiss or an Egyptian company? I think, you know, the world has become a village. Everything is so close to each other, connected. And what I see when I search for senior executives, what drives the ultimate success about a good placement is, do we find the right talent, the right leader that fits the company culture? So that's also what we apply when we do searches. You know, it's not just about matching a job description with a CV, but it's understanding how does the company work, what's the dynamic in the team. You know, that's typically when I start a search, I want to meet the people of the team that I recruit someone into, because I need to understand how they work, how they interact with each other, how they take decisions. And also, I love to go and see the place, you know, like the smell of the place. How does the company, what's the culture in the company itself? So, I mean, to make a long story short, I think it's lesser about is it Swiss or European or Egyptian, Middle Eastern, but it's more what's the company culture. That's sort of my view on the subject.
Tamer, what do you think about that? Are they actually looking for the same kind of leader?
I would add to what Patrick noted. I think the context of the leadership context for this process and this role is extremely important. I mean, it's we might hear from a company that they want a global leader. Our due diligence, our investigation requires us to ask, why do you want a global leader? Is it because the company is expanding globally and you need somebody that understands the global markets? Or do you need, you know, and so understanding the context is something very important. We've had incidences where clients come to us and they want to have a more international leader because they see that as an opportunity to upskill or upgrade the organization. And we have to ask, what is the relevance and the ability to bring somebody who can also create that cultural bridge and help transform the organization. So somebody who understands is relevant to the objective and the mandate for the role. What is this CEO, what is this executive coming to do in the organization? What is the expectation from this role? And what is the impact that this person is likely to bring or expected to bring to the organization? And also the cultural agility, you know, the person who can operate at the different levels. So if the organization needs a global leader, that leader also needs to be relevant, as Patrick noted, to the culture of the organization. Somebody who can actually take people along and not act as a solo, you know, as a solo leader.
Okay, so let's say we speak about this multicultural leader. Still, the term is quite unclear. What is a multicultural leader or international leader? So could you maybe share, both of you, an example where technical skills alone weren't enough and where understanding culture made or broke a placement, so where it had an impact? Tamer, maybe with you starting.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, we had a situation working with an Egyptian company, a large family-owned, 50 years of in existence, well-established, very local culture at that. The industry itself is a very local of nature, but the company has landed major contracts in Africa, so they needed somebody who has a multicultural and more of an international kind of view. We ran a search. We've identified a phenomenal leader who has, you know, understands the markets that they're expanding into. But then the gap was, this is a very local organization used to operate in a certain way, and this international leader, a European, being brought to the organization, and they're very different from one another. So how do we actually work with the organization to have the necessary patience and understanding to, for this leader to integrate in the business, and also coaching the leader, the international leader, to also build that relevance and build that trust and build that consensus within the organization before they start hammering on systems and processes. So it's a process and it's not a transaction. It's a journey for this leader and for the organization, and having those two very important components work in sync and come together is something very important. What we're looking for is a leader with agility, is a leader with adaptability, somebody who's also self-aware, and somebody who's also perceptive and able to create these bridges of trust and relevance to the organization and to the culture around them.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree to what Thomas said, and Karen, you made a good point. I mean, everyone talks about multicultural leadership, but if you would ask 5 people how they would define it, you probably get 6 different answers. So it's not so easy. And to be honest, I had to live through this as well. And just to correct what you said, I didn't live in Egypt. I lived for 12 years in Dubai, in the UAE. And despite
next time in Egypt, next time.
Yes, maybe, hopefully. And despite having spent a big part of my childhood in Africa and Senegal, where I grew up, it was a hard learning for me as well when I came to the Middle East, because yes, I realized things work differently. And you ask for an example. I can give you maybe one example that I experienced myself when I was at Emirates. We hired someone to drive our transformation initiative, and he was a very experienced, knowledgeable individual from Germany. But already his first appearance, when he announced the plans on how he wants to drive the transformation in front of a big audience, he started to attack some of the local leaders of the UN nationals, what mistakes they made in the past. And I sat there and thought, ooh, that won't go down well. And that's how we started. And I just thought, gosh, I mean, you can't behave like this with your German preconceived fact-based mind in such an environment. And sometimes I'm really surprised to see that even senior leaders didn't get the basics of how it is to adapt to a different culture. And I'm not a big fan of all these cliches, but there are certain principles, and there are several books were written about this. One I particularly like is The Culture Map by Erin Meyer, who sort of describes a bit what are the different leadership styles, and different dimensions, power distance, and so on. So, a bit of the basics, I would assume every senior leader to be able to apply to when they join a company.
Very good. So let's put maybe the question, maybe let's ask a more difficult question, or let's say in the opposite direction. Do you sometimes choose candidates or maybe a company choose a candidate who fits perfectly culturally, rather than choosing a truly good candidates, or truly the best candidates? Let's say when a client prefers what feels familiar, whether that's a Western profile or a local one, then really the perfect candidate. How do you encourage them to look beyond their comfort zone? Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And actually, that's also part of what we focus a lot on when we do searches. I mean, we only do C-level executives and non-exec board searches. So these are very senior positions in rather large multinational companies. And I believe, and I'm convinced, that still today, too often recruitment placements are based on pure skill set. So, the common approach is you have a job description, you describe the experience, the skills that someone brings along, and then you match it with, the references, the CV of the individual. And quite often, the personality traits are rather secondary or even neglected. And I've seen, because I was an executive myself for a long time, so I only moved into search 7 years ago, and I've seen, sitting on the other side of the table, what impact it can have, negative impact to a company if you hire the wrong individual into senior positions, particularly the wrong individual when it comes to mindset. That's why I don't share the view that the best candidate is the candidates that brings the best skills, the best experience in the specific field, but it has to fit the company. Having said that, that's also the way we work, as I mentioned. You know, I spend at least the same amount of time assessing the chemistry, the personality, the leadership style, and as I described earlier, understanding the environment we recruit someone in. How does that team work? You know, we do assessments on the team to see the dynamics, because if you hire someone who lacks a skill or an expertise, if the right mindset is there, you can always learn it. If you bring someone into an organization who has a completely different mindset in terms of values, in terms of priorities, how they approach it, even though they can bring the best expertise and skills, it will probably not work. And I've seen some big damages, you know, the one I just described before, having made recruiting the wrong individual, and then it's very, very difficult to correct this. So what I'm trying to say is mindset, personality, you know, the chemistry in the team is at least as important as the skills and the expertise that people bring along. And that's also, by the way we structure our reports when we write reports about candidates. 50% of it is, yes, it's skills, it's expertise, and so on. But 50% is purely on the personality and the soft side or the mindset. And you know, coming back to what you asked, Karen, sometimes this is quite difficult because you interact with some traditional organization. Sorry, no disrespect to HR organizations, but they're quite often driven just by facts. And then, you know, I have a first briefing meeting with the client, and all they talk about is skills and expertise. And when I start asking questions, okay, and what about the other side of the coin? You know, what mindset, what personality you need? I quite often have to help clients rewrite the job descriptions that mostly were written 10, 15 years ago, and as long, you know, being overhauled by the evolutions in the society, to completely rewrite the requirements. So helping the client as well to understand what is actually we need. You know, again, it's not just about expertise and skill. It's at least as important to find the individual with the right mindset and personality. Sorry if I was a bit lengthy here in explaining, but I think this is quite important.
No, not at all. And Tamer, how do you convince an organization to take an alien on board?
No, I mean, building on the very last point that Patrick made, the engagement that we have with the employers, with the client, is also extremely important. It's central. You know, you want to understand what the organization needs, but it's also in many cases, sad to say, organizations sometimes do not know at the onset what exactly they need. They have an idea of what could be you know, a relevant leader. But through the conversations and through discussions, we discover that, you know, maybe we need to venture out. Maybe we need to bring a younger leader. Maybe we need to bring somebody who has more cultural relevance, and somebody maybe who understands the future business challenges that the organization is about to embark into. So the conversation and the dialogue we have with the employers is very important, and that's why we reach out to understand, you know, the business context, as I said earlier, but also talking sometimes to board members or talking to some of the leaders. So it is trying to identify the best match. Competencies, you know, definitely, but most certainly equal to that is make sure that the personality, the cultural orientation, the adaptability, which is something extremely important. One of the challenges, you know, when we look at the leaders, you know, if they're well established, very successful in certain areas, you always have to dig deeper to see, are they able, if they're very successful and very self-confident, are they able to accept that there are things that they don't know? Are they willing to adapt? Are they willing to listen? Are they willing to embrace new ways of doing things? So, you know, adaptability is also a very important trait. So really having a more comprehensive, holistic view of what this leader stands for and what they could bring to the organization in relevance to the organizational needs is something that's very central.
Very good. So let's see now specifically between Europe and the MENA region, the leadership equation. Let's compare assumptions head on. Patrick, what assumptions do European clients often make about leadership in emerging or MENA markets that you constantly have to correct? And Tamer, what myth do MENA clients hold about European leaders? Let's compare what people have in mind when they say European leaders, MENA markets, and what you have to correct and adjust in the projection, Patrick?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big fan of these cliches and preconceived views, but unfortunately, you're right. A lot of people still have these views and think, particularly coming from, sort of the DACH region, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, where a lot is fact-based, precise, on time, that Middle Eastern leaders are not punctual, not reliable, not committed, not enough focused on facts, which, my experience, it's not the case, because in today's global connected economy, you simply cannot afford not to be professional in a big leadership role. And of course, there are differences. My experience when I was in Dubai, I was part of the management team, the executive management team of Emirates Airlines, leading the IT organization. I saw a lot of local companies just having to compete in the local market in the UAE, and that was a different ballgame. But the large multinationals, national companies acting at the global scale, we as Emirates, we had to compete with the best in the industries. So, we couldn't even afford to have leaders who were not up to the mark to compete also on, reliability, on punctuality, particularly in the airline business. So, yes, there might be some preconceived views, but I think it's changing. And particularly talking to clients, multinationals, international acting companies, I don't think they have that preconceived view anymore, because you need leaders who are capable of operating in every part of the world. Again, the large multinationals, they also deliberately try to rotate their leaders into different areas, put them to China, to South America, God knows where, so they can experience different cultures. So there, I think what is required, what is expected from senior leaders is pretty unique across different regions. So I don't think there is too many of these differences anymore nowadays. Might have been in the past, but definitely not today anymore.
Tamer, do you have the same experience?
I mean, it's in a global environment where you have talent that kind of moves across geographies and has experiences in different companies. What I typically look at is what is the professional environment that this leader was groomed in. You might have an African or an Egyptian leader who has Western education or have grew in a multinational company and evolved, up in the ranks. In contrast to a European who's only worked in a small-sized family business, with very little international exposure. So it's not about the nationality, and it's not about. It's really about the kind of exposure that these individuals and these candidates have been introduced to, and whether they're able to, stretch their leadership, capabilities, across different environments and across different cultures. So definitely, always debunk the myth or the stereotype that certain nationalities or certain leaders from certain parts of the world might have, because there are always exceptions. And I think nowadays with open media and with education access across the world, leaders and the organization that they work in, organizations evolve in very different ways.
Okay, but even let's say we stick still a bit longer with stereotype, and we speak about risk appetite. How does tolerance for failure or pressure for quick results shape the kind of leaders who succeed in Switzerland or would succeed in Egypt? Tamer.
Yeah, I think it's important to look at the organization, the nature of the organization, and the urgency of change in this organization. I mean, we work a lot with private equity firms with a very different pace and a very different mandate. You want to bring a leader who wants to turn around or transform a company within a predefined time frame. That's under a lot of pressure from investors. So the pace of change, the expectation of the speed and the ability of this leader and to turn things around and move things around is much more pressurized than if you're looking at kind of a well-established organization that's kind of it's kind of evolving and growing, at a kind of a steady rate. So always look at the context of the organization. Always look at the nature of the industry. Always look at the mandate itself. What is this leader expected to do to come in, and that certainly kind of changes the dynamics and changes what we're looking for in executive search.
Patrick, your view on that about risk
Yes,
appetite?
I mean that's an interesting topic. And if I understood you correctly, Karen, your question, there are two components to it. One is risk appetite, being ready to take risk and tolerance for failure, and the other dimension you mentioned is fast results, short-term thinking versus long-term thinking. So let me try to sort of structure my answer on these both topics. And again, I want to demystify the stereotype a bit that Europeans, or particularly Swiss, are not ready to take risk or have aversion to risks. I mean, it might have been in the past, but I think this has long changed. Today, in a fast-paced world, particularly when you see how quickly technology changes, you have to be agile as a company. I sit on the board of a pretty large industry manufacturing company myself, and the times where you could draw up these 5-year plans and then execute them are long gone, because you need to be flexible, you need to be agile. Something happens, something changes, and within weeks or even days, your whole strategy goes out of the window. So I think the paradigm has changed. Leaders nowadays that are successful in companies are the ones who are agile, who can adjust their plans quickly, who can work in different scenarios. And I think that's maybe something that comes out of the tech world as well. That's where I'm coming from originally. In the Silicon Valley, it's all about trying out things, running experiments, multiple experiments, taking risks, calculated risks, but then accept that you can fail, but fail fast and cheap is the paradigm that prevails in the Silicon Valley. And I see more and more of these paradigms getting adopted in general management or leadership styles. Now, coming back to whether Swiss people are risk averse or not, I mean, you can't be innovative if you don't take risks. It's all about taking risks, trying out things, and being ready to fail, because otherwise, if you just play safe, you're not going to be innovative. Now, you see every year, Switzerland ranks number 1 or 2 in the most innovative countries in the world. Now, how would that be possible if Swiss leaders would be averse to taking risks? So, that's why I wanted to demystify a bit that perception. I don't think Swiss people or Swiss leaders are particularly risk averse, in the contrary. Otherwise, we wouldn't be one of the most innovative economies in the world. So that's the first point. The second point, and I mentioned a bit the agility required, but I think this is also a bit dependent on the structure of the company. And that's probably something that came also from North America. Monthly results, monthly thinking, or quarterly results versus longer term thinking. The moment you publish your plan, the whole analyst and investor community is watching you very carefully. And that's why I believe that privately held companies are better positioned to be agile and change quickly to the changing environment. And particularly, I don't know how it is in Egypt, but in Switzerland, we have a lot of significant companies that are privately owned, that are not public. And that gives them a different perspective on how they shape their strategy. The strategy can be longer term, but they can adjust on the operational level much, much faster. And the larger the company becomes, typically the longer it takes to take a decision. That's also something I experienced, particularly when I was at Emirates. We grew very quickly. At the beginning, we had very short decision cycles. Decisions could be taken instantly. And then later on or now, if you look at how long it takes, because you build up structures, governance structures, everyone needs to approve. It takes ages, sometimes it takes multiple years to a decision to be taken. And that's not very good for your competitive positioning in the market.
Okay, so if I understand you right now, it doesn't depend on Egypt or Switzerland. On both sides, we need governance and compliance. We need agility. So I'm going to ask you, about your secret. When you are placing a leader who needs both then, governance, compliance, agility, say like, for instance, a CFO for a family business going public, or a CEO managing Swiss stakeholders in Cairo, what is the secret to find the right person? Tamer, we need your secret now.
I always look at and we as a firm, I think it's very important to look at the past journey of these leaders, how they have evolved, but what they have done, whether in terms of process transformation, improving controls and governance, driving innovation, trying to understand what exactly is the story and what exactly are the key milestones and the key achievements that they have accomplished in their past journey, and always a very, very important predictor of their future performance as well, as we place them in different roles. So always look at beyond this resume or the CV, beyond obviously looking at the competencies, trying to assess their personality, trying to understand their adaptability as leaders, but certainly look at what is in their bag and their portfolio of achievements, in order to see, what are they likely to bring to the table? What are they likely to bring to the new organization that they come to? And certainly leaders in this time and age, especially at this senior level, you need leaders who have an all-encompassing, understanding of the different pillars of good management, whether it has to do with governance or innovation, agility, etc. But certainly try to see what they really stand out on, what are the key competencies and the key successes that they're able to bring. And then, of course, matching that with the expectations and the requirements of these organizations. I think throughout the conversation, in the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes, we've spoken about different types of entities, family-owned businesses. They have quite the stretch when it comes to governance, because they might not have the kind of governance in place, and they're trying to welcome to corporatize. So that requires, building consensus within the organization, understanding the internal culture, but also driving this, and helping the organization to transform itself at the right pace, in a balanced way. We've had a family-owned businesses that brought in a leader, an exceptional professional. And then the chairman, once the candidate was selected, the chairman sat with the candidate and told them, in 1 year's time, we would like to look like you, but we don't want you to look like us. We want to be the ones changing. And when I heard that, as I was talking, with the candidate and trying to coach them, in the early weeks and months, I could see that this could be a problem, because that, in a way, gave the leader the carte blanche and the green light to really, just bulldozer ahead and push ahead, without necessarily listening to the organization, and taking the organization along in that journey of transformation. I said, you have to take that with a pinch of salt. You have to build trust. You have to build consensus. You have to understand what would be the low-hanging fruits, what would be the quick wins, but also the things that would need a little bit of time to build the support within the organization and the buy-in within the organization. So it is very important to really look at the context and working with leaders. And it's not a transaction. When you bring in a leader, it's not just from day one where they're able to instigate that change and do what they need to do. It is certainly a process, and maintaining that line of sight, both with the executive's place, but also with the employer and the organization, trying to kind of coach them, as you go along, in variable ways, to really make sure that it all kind of meshes together, it kind of settles, within comes in sync in order to instigate the change that needs to happen.
May I ask what happened to this candidate then, or to this person, to this CEO? Did he change anything, or did he quit after a year?
No, he's been going steady for the last 2 years, going on 2 years. What is interesting is that the chairman, after he mentioned this to the candidate, I think a couple of months later, the chairman reached out to me and says, the guy is moving too fast. You need to speak with him. And it was very funny, because it was one of these one of the many signals that this executive received early on from the chairman himself that kind of really put him to that pace. So it needed a little bit of time and the conversation. Luckily, this executive also had a good level of self-awareness to really kind of pull back, reset, reconnect with people, be conscious that you don't step on toes of people within the organization, really kind of to take them along. It took a while. And it took patience from the organization as well. This chairman and the board had to kind of realize that maybe they need to. They've given some, they didn't really help this induction or this integration, and they needed to kind of pull back as well and give some time for the candidate to do a good job. The candidate is doing great. The organization has really kind of evolved. They've really expanded, and both parties are much more happier and content, working together.
And they trust each other now. The chairman
and trust it, and trust is key. Trust is key, absolutely. And I think it takes receptiveness from both sides, and it takes adaptability. And we've talked about that extensively. A very, very important trait in this time and age, with this pace of change and with the evolutions of different organizations. The ability to be aware, self-aware, willing to change, and willing to adapt are very important traits in this time and age.
And Patrick, what is your secret to find the right person, combining everything, combining governance, compliance, agility?
Yes, I mean, a good question, and maybe the best answer is there is no secret. I mean, it's. I don't think there is
That's
sort of
very
a one
depressive.
size. Yes, it is, but there is no one size fits all approach here. I guess I think it's situational analysis of the company they're in. The current maturity, the team, as I mentioned earlier. And, I totally agree with what Tanya said before. The business we're in, it's not transactional. It's not just about placing a CEO or CFO somewhere, but it's helping the company shaping their future, finding the right talents that can bring the company forward. And we have a large amount of the business we do is repeat business, because it's all about, how can we help the company find the right people and grow these talents within the company. So the best compliment to us is if we place someone in a role and a few years later, the individual gets promoted to the next level. I mean, it happened to us. So we placed a CIO in a company. 3 years later, he became the CEO of the company, and we were asked to then recruit his successor, again, the CIO. I mean, this is sort of the best compliment you can get as an executive searcher, because we also do leadership development, we do interim management, we do coaching. So it's like a more holistic approach. But having said that, I mean, there are certain patterns that I see changing, not primarily driven by cultural differences or regional differences, but maybe, sort of societal changes. I see the younger generation, they don't like to be told what to do. So the move away from hierarchical leadership style to more egalitarian leadership style. You read all these books about unboss and servant leadership and holacracy and God knows what, but I think there is definitely a trend. So these leaders who think they know it all, because they were CEO and they know everything about the company and are the only ones who should take decisions, I think these times are over, and it's not healthy for nowadays companies who need to move fast, to have such leaders. People who understand that a network of individuals is always smarter than a single individual. And it requires quite a bit of humility as a leader to say, no, I don't know all of it, but I have a great team and great people within the organization. And the more minds and brains I can use to take decisions, the better decisions tend to be. But this is a big shift from the traditional hierarchical structures that we still have in large companies. But this is something that I think we focus a lot on, and we also try to help our clients challenge the requirements they have. Because as I mentioned earlier, these job descriptions, whatever they're written 10, 15 years ago, might have been perfect at that time, but not nowadays anymore. So helping the clients also in a dialogue, finding out what is it you really require. I also see that in certain geographies or cultures where traditionally you had a more hierarchical leadership side. So I deal a lot with India, particularly when I was in Dubai. A lot of my staff were from the subcontinent. And traditionally people said, yeah, India is the workshop of the world. You tell them what to do and they execute. If you see what's happening now, this has long changed. It's become like an innovation culture. The younger generation, they have that curiosity, they want to learn, they want to shape the future. It's much more about, impact, about the purpose of the work, not just money and the salary they get. So this is really changing. And I think these sort of balances out the cultural differences across the regions, because this is the general trend that I see across different cultures. So again, to make a long story short, I think that the secret, if you want the secret of success, is spending enough time understanding the clients, the team that you recruit someone into, also understanding the strategy, because what composes the team today might not be the right thing in the future, and then trying to help the client finding the right individuals for their future journey and not for the past. This is essential on the skills expertise side, as well as on the soft factors, the mindset and the chemistry of the individuals.
Thank you. And now let's tackle the elephant in the room, because now we spoke about skills and expectations, but there is one expectation that will never change. It's compensation, even for the new generation, I guess. So how do you manage expectation when Swiss transparency meets, for instance, Egyptian negotiation culture, or when European social benefits clash with MENA cash-heavy packages? How do you deal with that, Patrick?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And, you know, to be honest, that transparency or push for transparency is not necessarily a European or Swiss thing. I think this primarily came from North America as well, you know, with, having to publish everything and governance and transparency. And the intention about being transparent was, to make sure that people are not overpaid. But what's happening now is actually the opposite. You suddenly see what other people earn in other companies, and in general, the salary level has rather increased than been reduced. So, and you see a lot of companies now challenging this and saying, "No, we don't want to have that transparency anymore because it just increases our cost." That's one dimension. The other dimension, which I think is important, you mentioned, is the different constitution of the packages. And, at senior level, I think this is part of our role to also help the client as well as the candidates to be able to compare. I mean, in Middle East, you have, where you have a lot of expats, you have these expat packages, and you need, at the end of the day, you need to have a look at the full package, including, what fringe benefits do you get, housing, schooling allowance for children, health benefits, and last but not least, also the tax implication. And that's what we typically do, particularly in international searches. We have to sit down with the candidates and the clients and sort of put together a full view on the package, because it's not just about the cash component, but it's a full view. That's one dimension. And then the other dimension, what I mentioned earlier, I see that the younger generation are, in my view, lesser driven by money, but are more and more also driven by the content of the work. Do I have meaningful work? Is there a purpose in what we do? And that's sometimes even more important than the cash benefit they bring home. But that might be different from country to country. But I strongly see a shift away from purely cash into, how much influence can I have in a company? Can I make an impact? I want to make a positive contribution to the success of the company. And that outweighs quite often the cash component of the salary.
Tamer, what is your more Egyptian view on the topic?
I mean, obviously, the big story in Egypt, and being in this part of the world, proximity to the Middle East has meant that there's a talent war. There's a talent attrition, and there's a need. So mobility of talent is something that's kind of very fluid, certainly globally, but I think more particularly in this part of the world, due to the disparity of salaries in Egypt versus, the Middle East, which, right across the Red Sea. So this meant that there's a very heavy emphasis and a lot of conversations and a lot of negotiations when it comes to compensations. And I've seen maybe two kind of contrasting examples. I've seen situations where you're trying to retain talent in Egypt from going to the Middle East or going abroad and trying to make sure that they are when you're bringing in a leader, you just don't want to, you also want to retain these leaders. So it's not about talent acquisition, it's also about talent retention. So make sure that in the compensation structure and the packages, you also try to include elements for retention, maybe delayed payouts or, certain milestones, or, if they're 3 years into the job, there'll be certain, kind of bonus, retention bonus that kind of comes in. And then the other component or the other contrast is trying to bring leaders from abroad, trying to attract talent, Egyptian or otherwise, from Dubai, from Saudi, from the Middle East, in areas where there's a shortage of talent of a particular skill set or particular, leadership, profile, trying to bring those to Egypt and trying to compete with the much higher salaries in the Middle East. Then you try to look at other dimensions, as Patrick noted. Maybe there's a very interesting transformational role that these leaders would forego their kind of steady corporate role in Dubai and come to Egypt because there's a big transformation that they would lead, and that really is a milestone achievement in their careers. Or they want to, or they simply want to, bring their families, into Egypt. So there's a social aspect to it, and there's a cultural aspect to it. So certainly compensation in Egypt when it comes to in the executive role, and I'm sure across the board, have really seen a lot of adjustments. What is interesting to see that in certain areas, in particular industries, the gap between salaries in Egypt and the Middle East have kind of narrowed when you go up the pyramid, because you need to basically retain these leaders. It becomes very imperative that you find the right leaders and retain them. So we've seen that kind of evolution that happened in the last 24 months, and it's been obviously at very high kind of percentages of change if you look at from a value standpoint. And of course, more creative in the ways you want to construct these compensation packages. So definitely remains to be cash heavy, but also comes in with things like, ESOP and, shares in the company. And as I mentioned earlier, kind of delayed retention bonuses, in order to retain and ensure these leaders are sustained in this role and ensure leadership is, continuous, steady, to produce the results it's intended to do.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question to Tom directly? Sorry if I jump in here, because this is an interesting aspect, and the whole notion around war for talents. I see that in the last 18 to 24 months, this has really reduced because of different factors. Slowdown in economy, technology that emerge, and so on. And I just ask myself, are we at the point where the pendulum swings in the other direction? And funny enough, I was just listening to the speech of Harari, the famous author. He gave a speech yesterday at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he talks about the impact of agentic AI on leadership roles, where he says this is like migrants. You have the AI migrants coming in and taking leadership roles, stealing our jobs. People are afraid of migrants because they come in, they change the culture, they take your jobs. And he says the same is happening now with AI agents. They're much cheaper, they're much faster, you can replicate them quickly, they don't forget, they don't need to go on holidays. Now, what is you, Tamer? What will that do to the compensation packages of traditional leaders?
I think it's a great question, and I think that there's not a single organization or leader that is not challenged with the need to adapt and get on the AI train, if you will. So I think it's very important, and I think it's every leader would think that they're indispensable, and it's they would never be replaced, or their roles and scopes would not diminish or be compromised with agentic AI or AI in general. But it is happening. It's a reality that we have to concede to, and we don't even know the bottom of it. I think this remains to be a learning curve for the whole world and for leaders for certain. And I think it's kind of shaping organizations and shaping responsibilities of leaders very, very quickly. But I mean, it has not yet kind of scratched the surface when it comes to compensations, in the organizations at large. I'm not just talking from a leadership standpoint, simply because there is a considerable competition over talent. You're talking a country like Egypt now that's kind of starting to hit the 4-5% GDP growth. there's a fantastic investment momentum if you look in the last 12 months alone, and hopefully we see that continue. And you also see tremendous growth happening in Saudi Arabia, and you see evolved and developed economies, certainly from a services standpoint, in the UAE and elsewhere, in Qatar and others, across the region. And so I think there is tension, in this part of the world compared to whatever is happening in North America and whatever is happening in Europe, and whatever is happening in Asia being affected by, the Trump tariffs and, the need for them to kind of pivot. So I think it's very interesting. I don't want to, sound as if I'm saying, the Middle East is where things are happening, but certainly a heightened momentum when it comes to business activity, investment, is certainly putting a pressure on talent. And so you see that kind of momentum growing, and it's really creating that, tension and demand for leaders, and obviously compensations and reward, goes along with it.
Is that a good answer for you, Patrick?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But one of the thoughts I had recently as well, because I'm coming out of the tech environment, and when you see how AI has already changed the way, for instance, software is developed, you see suddenly whole systems, even ERP systems, being coded using vibe coding, which is AI-generated code, within weeks and months. I attended a conference in the Silicon Valley in October, and everybody is talking about building is cheaper than buying. While it was only 3-4 years ago, it was the complete opposite. Now companies are using AI to generate code, to integrate different applications and so on. And they're talking about companies only consisting of 2-3 physical individuals, and the rest is all agents. That's true for software engineering. That's true for contact center in particular, all the services industry. And I was just asking myself, what's going to happen to these Accentures and Wipros and Infosys of this world, who have hundreds and thousands of people in India in call centers and in software development centers, if you don't need them anymore? And, only a few years ago, we were all talking about the war for talent that Damer mentioned, and I think there is a big risk that within a very short period of time, this will completely change. Of course, it's never going to eat as hot as it's been cooked, how we say in Switzerland. But typically what happens is, on a short term, the impact of new technology is overestimated, but in the long term, it's massively underestimated. So while now you see a lot of people saying, all these great benefits that AI should bring, it's never materialized, these use cases don't work. On a short term, yes. But, in 2-3 years down the line, how will that shape that whole notion around war of talents and jobs, and particularly, what do we need in these companies? So I don't have the answer either. So that's why I asked the question.
But here's my turn to ask Patrick a question, being the technology expert himself. With AI and with agentic AI, you mentioned, I can understand that this is likely to change and transform the role of chief technology officers and CIOs. But how does that affect the COs, for instance? I understand that the processes under a CTO will vary immensely. You don't need to hire coders. You have AI agents to do this job, but you still need to and that changes the weight and the mix of what you do as a CTO. But what I'm asking, if you look at the CEO level, that the space that's going to impact, the way that the AI would impact this role, obviously still there, but it's much less, because the day-to-day, you're looking at strategy, you're looking at leadership, you're looking at people, you're looking at financials, you're looking at different aspects of the organization. AI is going to empower you in a certain way, obviously, to drive decisions. It's going to empower you in terms of automated processes and automated tasks. So hopefully liberates and gives you more space to do more strategic things. But you still need to drive strategy, and you still need to lead organizations, and need to look at governance and ESG and other very important aspects of the organization. So my query is, on the technology type functions, the advance of AI is going to change in a bigger way what they do as leaders. But if you look at the other kind of functions, AI will empower them, but it's not going to mean that they are less needed, or it means that they have to keep up with the change. But their roles are in a way necessary in this very same way, because they still do other things that are not kind of process or task confined.
I mean, great point, Tamer. And funny enough, I just published a book last year with the title "The Technology Illusion," who exactly deals with that topic. The strategic importance of technology in companies. And yes, AI is probably just going to amplify all of it, but the patterns are actually not new. Technology over the last decades has shaped the future of every company. Digitalization, you have it. And it's a bit the flavor of the day. It's blockchain, then it's quantum computing, and so on. I think the common thread is that technology, as I said, will shape the future of every business, every company. And what you rightfully say, in the past, companies had a CIO or CTO was dealing with technology, and the rest of the leaders didn't have to deal with technology because it was too complex, too fast moving, and so on, and they just delegated it to the CTO or CIO. And I don't think that works anymore nowadays, because technology is at the center of every business nowadays. Every business is becoming sort of a technology-driven business. And you expect from every individual that they know how to deal with human resources and with financial resources. But still widely accepted is they don't need to understand anything about technology because you can delegate it to the CTO, CIO. I don't think that's going to work anymore in the future. And I think future leaders need to be tech savvy. They need to understand the possibility, the potential of the newest technology. They also need to have that curiosity that I mentioned earlier to learn new things. Whatever worked well in the last decade might not be the right thing anymore going forward, because the world is changing, particularly driven by technology. And I still feel the role of technology is very often massively underestimated by a lot of the top leaders, particularly CEOs. So the CEO of the future will have to be very tech savvy and understand the technology and what technology can do for his business and his company.
So would you say, for instance, that a candidate with no tech notion or knowledge, which I guess is for CEO position currently is the most is not rare. Do you think they have no chance anymore then?
No chance is maybe overstated, but I see also when I discuss the requirements with my clients, as soon as I touch on the topic of tech, they realize that they have underestimated it, and then we have a big discussion and say, how will tech impact your business? And regardless what business it is, financial services, construction, manufacturing, transportation, everything is massively impacted by technology. I typically use the example, when I joined Emirates in 2006, you would rate an airline how good they transport you from A to B, how comfortable the seat is, the food and the service on board. And IT was just a back office function, automating the booking process, the ERP, and so on. And now, as a customer, you already rate an airline, how good is their app, how seamless is the booking process, how can I use my content on board, stream my music onto the onboard information system and the other way around. So technology has become an essential part of the product and services in every business. So if leaders are not ready to accept that the role of technology has massively changed, I think they will have real difficulties in the future. And yes, I tend to sort of push candidates that I think they understand technology and they know how technology can be applied to that business, because it's also about exploring or exploiting new business models, digital products. A lot of typically physical products is moving into software, it's being virtualized. That impacts the processes in the companies, the whole supply chain. And if you just neglect this, it's going to be very difficult to be successful in the future. Because if you don't do it as a company, someone else will do it. Your competitors will do it. New entrants will do it, and then you'll have a problem.
So Tamer, yeah, sorry. No, please go ahead.
Yeah, just because that's a very interesting point. I've seen in non-technology companies, which probably is a very bad statement, because I think every company now is going to be a technology company, with access to AI, with access to looking at data and looking at analytics and trying to make sure that systems are digitalized, etc. But my point is, if you are not a software development or a technology offering a service company, I think the role of a CTO, from what I've seen in Egypt, I've seen that role evolving to being transformational catalyst. So chief technology officers are now dubbed as chief transformation officers. They're really looking at, with access to data, with access to digital resources, they basically help transform organizations not only from a processes and system standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint. So we hired a chief technology officer for a real estate developer in Egypt. And the role has evolved in the first 6 months from a chief technology to a chief transformation. And then they basically had human resources being added to his fold because they needed to complement the change on processes and systems to the change of culture and their people-centered kind of way of thinking. So transformation is kind of the next thing from what I've seen. The kind of that evolution. That is the way technology officers and information officers are transforming. And the other aspect to it is looking at analytics, data analytics. So again, that in kind of to support decision making in organizations, how do you make sure that the financial decisions with the CFO are empowered, make sure that the analytics basically are helping them, make the right decisions and drive financials? How do you support the operations by access to information? Patrick has long experience with Emirates. How do you make sure that you gather all the information, the operations metrics, and the performance metrics to really drive improved service quality or improved product development or improve operations at large? So, and that lives on data, and data runs on digital if you have the right systems in place.
I totally agree, and I think just to add another example, because what you see happening today is that technology moves out of the back office. In the past, you used IT to automate your back office process. That's what I call digitalization. This is not a transformation. Digital transformation to me is changing your business model and exploring new opportunities using technology. So, for instance, I did a search a few years ago for one of the largest companies in physical locks and security systems, multi-billion company, globally acting, and they're really the market leaders in these physical locks and keys. They realized that the future of security systems are digital security systems. So they created a new business unit, basically building up a digital security platform that they offer to hotel chains and real estate developers and so on, where you don't have physical locks and keys anymore, but it's all digital. So this is a completely different ballgame, different business. You probably sell through different channels to different partners, clients in different markets with digitalized products. And now just imagine a traditional industry manufacturing company who physically, were producing locks in the past that had to manage a supply chain and so on, suddenly moving into a digital business. And that's quite a change. And that's what I call a digital transformation, changing your business model completely.
Tamer, would you like to add something to that?
I think it's a fantastic space how we see different roles kind of evolve with the with the change of in the kind of digital space, technology and AI. And I think we will continue to see that kind of evolution take place. I mean, we are now pitching in the GCC for artificial intelligence officers. Organizations now, especially with how certain organizations in UAE and now kind of Saudi is following, where they're kind of becoming more eager to kind of make sure that they are in the forefront of the change and innovation that's happening in the technology space, and certainly try to become a powerhouse when it comes to AI and data centers, etc. So we've seen artificial intelligence officers being brought in and being pitched to drive these organizations, that drive innovation and transformation and digital in these organizations. So really trying to bring AI becoming kind of a central construct in how they're thinking as organizations.
Lovely. Thank you. So maybe just a last question. As Boyden, how do you prepare your clients to all those shifts and important leadership qualities change for 2030? I mean, how do you Because I guess you are dealing with people who are maybe not on the front line in boards, etc. So how do you prepare them to be ready to get those new requirements on board? Tamer.
I think we are have a privilege being in the executive search space because we speak with candidates every single day. We speak with organizations every single day, and I think that that kind of in a way, and I tell this to the team, to our teams, in the kind of the back end, we are more of a research agency at core rather than simply kind of an executive search of talent acquisition. So we have to really build our narrative, build our understanding, and build our services based on understanding, insights, market data, market feedback, candidate feedback in order to build our understanding. So when we sit with clients in the very first meetings, it's all about information sharing. It's also about insight. What insights do we have about this particular market, about this particular sector, the talent movements and leadership, evolution in that space. Similar to some of the examples that we've discussed today. What is happening in the real estate space? What's happening in the banking side? What's happening with fintech? What's happening with technology? What's happening with hospitality? And obviously market specifics and sector specific. But there are always insights that we have access to that we would like to share with our clients when we first engage with them, and that helps them and helps us kind of shape up what they need as an organization. Make sure that we are developing a solution, and it's more of a solution than just an individual or a set of individuals that are being brought to the organization, but really try to bring a solution to what this organization needs to do today, but also more importantly, what they need to do in the future. So often some of the conversations of you now have a job description, now you telling us what kind of leader you want, but with this leader, with this profile that you're sharing with us, is this future ready? Is this future proof? Can this leader, sustain in 2030? Can this leader help drive the change that needs to happen in this organization in the next 4 years? So I think there is a lot of interaction that has to happen, insights from our side, context and understanding, and obviously anything that's industry specific that clients share with us, and that kind of meeting of information that helps us together collectively shape up what they believe that they need as an organization, and they have to embrace that solution. And of course, throughout the search exercises that we go through, the journey that we go through, we also come up with new information. There's new insights coming from the leaders, whether it has to do market or sector or geography or kind of a technical kind of insight that's kind of evolved. Something that is availed to our clients as we kind of building this this process. One of the very first steps when we are after we assign the mandate, we work on mapping. So we map who are the key players, what are the key successes, what are the business models that's out there. I'm working with a real estate developer. And we're looking at the model for facility management, and we've seen very different models in the market. Whether it's an in-source, outsource, and so one of the insights that we're giving our client, what is the business models out there? What are the different prototypes that they should be looking at as an organization, and then accordingly, what kind of leader would be the best fit to help drive the change or to help set up this new organization for our client.
Patrick, are you doing exactly the same way with Swiss clients?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's also the big difference that Tamer mentioned earlier, transactional business versus long-term partnership with our clients. And the interaction is essential. We talk a lot with our clients, with candidates, but we also try to create platforms. So what we do in Switzerland is we organize roundtables, bring people together. For instance, what I do every year is I do a survey or a study on a specific topic that is relevant to companies, typically with one of the leading business schools here in Switzerland. We just did one in November. So we do that survey, that study, and then we invite top leaders for an evening event discussing this together. So what does that mean for your company? And this has nothing per se to do with executive search. but it's about creating a platform and bringing leaders together to discuss what are the challenges and the opportunities as well of today's leaders. And that's well received. We love to also be a bit, sort of thought leaders. We publish, as I said, articles, write books, facilitate these sessions, getting people together, because these are all relevant topics that shape the future of their companies strategically, but also when it comes to finding the right talents for the future. I mean, what we do is we bring people together. We help companies finding great leaders for their future, and we help great leaders finding a great future in great companies. And that's all about bringing people together and engaging in dialogues.
So we are back to the Davos the Davos topic of this year, spirit of dialogue, which is very very Swiss.
But if I may, I was listening yesterday to part of the speech of Trump. If someone just goes on an hour bashing everyone else, that's not really a dialogue in my view. Sorry if I don't want to be too political here, but that's not the spirit of dialogue, obviously.
You're not being very neutral there.
Maybe not.
So before we leave the floor to questions, maybe one more, or maybe let's say two more questions I have for you. One is, let's say I would like to build a leadership team right now, whether I'm a board member or I'm a chief human resource officer or I'm a founder of a company. What would be one thing I should start doing differently tomorrow? Patrick.
That's not
one
an easy
thing,
question.
just one thing.
I think if I look at what is required for leaders in the future, and I think we touched on a lot of these topics. So we were talking about multicultural sensitivity. I think this is essential. And the more the world is growing together, the more important it gets. Then we spoke about leadership style. I think egalitarian leadership style versus hierarchical leadership style is also a big shift happening. So people, no big ego, accepting that networks of people are more efficient and smarter than individuals. Then we also spoke about long-term planning versus agility, flexibility. I think this is absolutely essential. You need to be agile. You need to be able to adapt to the changing environment. It can happen from one day to another. Suddenly you're being imposed with 50% tariffs. And if you do a big part of your business in North America, you need to be able to react regardless of your 5-year plan that the board signed off. And then I still believe, and maybe I'm a bit naive there, I believe in honesty, transparency, openness, and doing the right things for the company, the society, the environment. And then we also spoke about tech. I think tech savviness. I think leaders in the future need to understand the capability, the possibility of technology. So to sum up, I think these are some of the essential traits that I believe future leaders should bring to the table. Of course, they need to know their business and the usual table stakes.
And Tamer, what do you think would be the one thing which a founder, for instance, should do differently to get a team on board?
Again, it's not a one thing. I think oversimplifying, this one is does more harm. But certainly, I would add to what Patrick mentioned. I think it's very important for future leaders to be willing to learn. Being able to to recognize what are the skill sets and what are the areas that the organization or the individual leaders are missing, and be able to develop on these. And AI is is a very vivid example of an area that every leader needs to be aware of what this new capability can bring to the table. How could they embrace it and learn it, how they're able to manage organizations that use these different capabilities. So certainly very important. The other aspect is certainly adaptability. Self-awareness is something that's very important. Being aware and being to surrounding yourself with the mechanism for you to get feedback from the organization is very important. But also being able to adapt and respond to what needs to happen as a leader within the organization. I think as we move and as we become more egalitarian and more kind of more open from a leadership standpoint, and we've seen leaders across different organizations globally, who are kind of there's kind of an easier access. I've seen a lot of the technology companies where leaders are kind of all out and about, and with empowerment for younger talent, for empowerment for diversity. I think people need to be receptive to getting this feedback, build the necessary self-awareness, be able to react to that understanding, and learn new things. And new capabilities, something is very important. So certainly work on evolving as leaders and not be static, because this is how leaders can sustain themselves, and accordingly how organizations can sustain and grow.
And if I may just add one point, because I totally agree to what Tom has said. We discussed also that curiosity, being able to learn new things and being interested in new development. But also we spoke about risks, being ready to take risk, to try out new things, to challenge the norms, because you can't be innovative if you only play safe. And I think that's also a trait which is absolutely essential. Critical thinking, challenging, questioning, not everything we've done in the past is the right thing anymore for the future.
Lovely. And now my last question, very simple, very, very easy. If there is one message we could all take away today with us after this webinar, what would it be? The most important message we should think about all day long, Tamer?
I think it's important to be able to have a dialogue, talk about the spirit of dialogue, but certainly have a dialogue within the organization, with the different stakeholders, kind of a self-regulating mechanism and an ability to kind of evolve and grow in the organization and see what needs to happen. It's becoming a very competitive space. The world is becoming, less predictable. Technology is certainly, adding momentum and pace to the change. Organizations and individuals and countries are facing a lot of developments and uncertainties. We talk about Egypt as a big example of changes, and every time I speak with a leader in Egypt, they tell me, as part of their achievements, how they've kind of withstood 2 revolutions and 3 devaluations and change of trade and access to currency, etc. But I mean, that's not an isolated kind of phenomenon. I think everywhere in the world there's change. So ability to maintain that openness to information from the different stakeholders, make sure that there's some sort of a consensus of what are the areas for improvement and what these organizations need to do and how they can evolve and grow. I think it's something very, very important. This is the only insurance for organizations to survive in this ever-changing environment we live in.
And Patrick, the last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Tamer said, my advice, particularly to leaders, would be don't rest on your laurels. Don't just think you've seen it, you've done it, you know how to do it. Reinvent yourself. And there is actually a great book by Marshall Goldsmith with the title "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and I think that's pretty spot on. And keep reinventing yourself.
A very good one. Thank you very much. Now I think we'll go for the question. If there is any question, Malak, your turn.
Yes, we have 2 questions, which is perfect. We'll just address one to each of our speakers. So the first question I think is perfect for Patrick. Kamal Abdelmalik was asking, he said, we can see many multinationals are shifting from appointing expatriates in leadership roles to promoting locally based leaders with multinational exposure. So to what extent does this reflect a growing recognition that deep cultural understanding is critical to business performance?
Yeah, interesting perspective. And my view is we need to be very careful not being carried away with some populistic statements. You see that all over now. America first and God knows what. That was also something that I had to deal a lot with in the UAE. We had, the Emiratisation initiative where we needed to promote local leaders. Having said that, I believe it's not healthy for companies in any part of the world to be too dependent on expats. So finding the right balance between growing, grooming, developing local talents, because there's also a local culture in these companies, versus bringing talent from outside. I think that's a difficult balance to strike. Whether the pendulum is swinging in one or the other direction, I don't know. I think this is very much dependent on also a bit the flavor of the day. Sorry. In Europe, I think we probably see lesser of this. I don't know about other countries in the Middle East, but in the UAE it was a strong topic because, particularly the UAE is a country where 80% of the population is expats, and being so dependent on expats is also dangerous for the local population. So I understand and support some of these trends, but I wouldn't say there is a global trend in that direction.
Okay. Tamer, anything to add before we ask the next question?
No, I'm conscious. I would love to get more questions. So, I know we're tight on time, but
Yes.
Go ahead.
So the next question is from Osama Sulaiman. He asked, how do you see the talent map of the Middle East in the next 5 years, given the boom of investments and growth in the region? Egypt is in the heart of this regional growth and it's facing big market shifts and movements. So how do you think this will play out?
This is a great question. There's a very important aspect, a very important feature that I think we need to be cognizant of as you look at the world in the next, 50 years. Demography is a very important change that I don't think is getting enough attention. If you look at population, India, exceeding China in population and population growth. Egypt, is a country that we talk about congestion and economic distress, but certainly will continue to be a hub for talent, source for talent, and a hub for talent. So I think it's and of course you look at the different size or countries around us and how the demography is kind of affecting their ability to contribute to the global talent, to 20, 30, 40 years going forward. And obviously the challenge we have in Europe, an aging population. I'm sure Patrick would have a lot of insights on that as well. But certainly something that's kind of inviting more talent coming from Africa and Asia to kind of fill some of the gaps we have on our talent standpoint. I'm optimistic about Egypt as a country playing a bigger role from a talent standpoint. Improved education, openness, more multinationals, more investors coming into Egypt and help grooming, very capable leaders. I've come from the era where I've seen in the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of multinationals coming to Egypt, the P&Gs and the Coca-Cola and the Pepsis of the world, with bigger presence, and how that has shaped generations of leaders that are now the CEOs of different organizations as far as, if you look at the local market as Egypt is concerned, because they've come as graduates from this momentum of multinational companies and investing in talent and building, amazing, management training programs and organizations that helped develop, very capable leaders, 15 and 20 years after. So I am optimistic about, and I'm very curious about how the different investments and the flow of investments coming into Egypt and the Middle East at large, how that's going to help organizations evolve, grow, and scale, and accordingly also groom and graduate a lot of capable leaders, going forward. So I think Egypt will play a bigger role. Africa will certainly play a bigger role, going forward in terms of contributing to the talent landscape going forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's it for the questions.
So anything you want to add, Tamer or Patrick, to the conversation we had today? I hope it was up to your expectation. It was over our expectation on our side, so we are very happy and very thankful that you gave your time, your insights, and your expertise today. Really very thankful for that. Anything you would like to add at that point?
I want to thank you, Karen. I want to thank you, Karen. I mean, we're very honored to be part of that initiative. Very important, and I'm certainly looking forward to the next sessions where I'm sure the business community will benefit a lot from the dialogues and the conversations taking place. I'm very thankful to my dear colleague Patrick. I think it's interesting. You've kind of put us against each other, and with contrasting, or what you thought would be contrasting ideas and concepts. I think certainly it helped me kind of come closer and realize that there are a lot of commonalities, across very different continents and different environments. But I mean, we're all in the same pursuit of good leaders.
Yeah, I mean, from my side as well, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to have that discussion. I enjoyed it very much. And as Thomas said, you probably realized, there are probably less differences, cultural differences, also in our perspective views. You said initially you wanted to put us against each other, and actually we share most of what we discussed. We share the views. Might be a bit boring, maybe, but no. I mean, I am personally very much attached to the region as well, and I enjoy this very much. And I'd love to continue the discussions. So also to everyone who listened in, if you want to continue discussions on one or the other topic, please feel free to reach out to us directly. We'll be more than happy to continue the discussion, and wish you a lot of success in these exciting times, and look forward to the next session.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I just want to thank as well Sarah from Swiss Cham for being there, and Malak, who did a fantastic job preparing this webinar. So really, thank you very much. This is a teamwork. And I will use the opportunity. I don't see if you see it. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe not. Swiss Cham just launched an impact report, a very important report about the Swiss economy in Egypt. So please have a look at Swiss Cham website and all the social media, because this is really a very important report. So thank you again all for being there today. And we really hope to see you next month, because seeing is going to happen on a monthly basis. So see you next month. We will invite 2 entrepreneurs from Switzerland and Egypt. Maybe they will discuss and debate a little bit more harder than today. And we wish you all a very, very happy and new year. It's not too late, and a good day. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Malik, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
you.
Bye-bye.